I've got a story for you that proves two things. First, never skip breakfast, especially if your morning requires high-stakes maneuvering. And second, sometimes, the very worst day of your life is just a curtain rising on something marvelous. Our heroine, Vivian, was having a genuinely terrible morning. Everything hinged on this one job interview. We're talking about a corner office, a salary that could finally pull her out of the red, and a chance to do the kind of environmental planning she truly believed in. But the meeting was at 9 sharp, and the antique clock on her mantel had decided to stop ticking at 3:17 a.m. She woke up late, threw on the impeccable navy suit, and bolted out the door. The drive to the coastal office park was supposed to be 45 minutes of calm. Today, it was a terrifying, high-speed ballet along the treacherous cliffs of Route 101. Vivian was rushing, pushing the little sedan like a race car, hands white-knuckled on the wheel. She was flying past the designated speed limits, her mind a frantic tally of how many minutes she still had left. 8 minutes to spare, 6 minutes to spare, for minutes. Then, she hit the coffee stand turnoff, and that was the moment fate decided to trip her up. She swung the car too wide, hit the brakes too hard, and the cheap cup of lukewarm coffee she had foolishly balanced on the passenger seat flew. It didn't just spill, it executed a perfect airborne arc, splattering the dashboard, the seat, and, most importantly, her entire leather wallet. Now, a lot of people would pull over, grab some napkins, and accept the sticky residue. Not Vivian. She instinctively lunged for it, trying to catch the wallet before the liquid could seep into the precious documents, her ID, the $50 for parking, the sentimental picture of her grandmother. She wrenched the door open just a crack to shake it, still rolling at a low speed, when a sudden gust of sea wind, whipping up from the Pacific, caught the small, worn leather artifact. It slipped from her fingers, tumbled out the open door, and vanished over the small, rocky embankment. Vivian slammed on the brakes. She looked at her watch. She had 2 minutes. 2 minutes to find the most important thing she owned and still make it across town for the interview that meant everything. In that moment of sheer, heart-stopping panic, she didn't see the sleek, black Rolls-Royce Ghost pulling up a few yards behind her. She didn't hear the expensive Italian leather of the man's shoes as he stepped onto the gravel shoulder. All she saw was the cliff edge, the tangled scrub, and the shimmering reflection of the ocean far below. She threw the gear stick into park, forgetting to fully engage the emergency brake in her haste. She simply had to get that wallet. And that's when he appeared. He was a silhouette against the blinding sun, impossibly tall, wearing a suit that cost more than her car. His hair was silver at the temples, his face chiseled like an old Greek statue, and in his hand, held carelessly between 2 fingers, was her coffee-stained wallet. Looking for this mess? His voice was a low, resonant rumble, utterly calm in her storm. Relief, a huge, drowning wave of it, washed over her. She stumbled up the embankment, tears of stress pricking her eyes. Oh, thank goodness. Thank you, you have no idea what that means to me. I'm so sorry. I was just rushing for an interview. I can't believe I was so clumsy. Now, I know some of you are listening thinking, is he going to ask her to subscribe? Well, dear listeners, let me tell you, this channel is growing so fast, faster than Vivian's heart rate right now, and if you haven't hit that button yet, well, you're missing out on the best stories. Go on, join the family. Vivian snatched the wallet back, her hands shaking, and immediately started checking the contents. ID present. $50 present. Grandmother's photo present. She barely looked at the man, Silas. He was just a helpful, wealthy blur standing between her and financial salvation. Well, I'd suggest you take a moment and breathe then. That's a nasty curve. Wouldn't want you flying off the road, Silas said, a slight, almost amused smile playing on his lips. Vivian didn't appreciate the judgment. He didn't understand what was at stake. I'm fine, she snapped, her rush returning. Thank you for finding it. I have to go. She wheeled around, sprinted back toward her car, and jumped inside. And as she fumbled with the keys, stuffing the wallet back into her purse, she realized with a sickening, gut-punching certainty that she'd made a mistake. A truly fatal mistake born of pure, desperate panic. Because in her rush to get the wallet and flee, she had not only forgotten to thank the wealthy man properly, she had entirely forgotten to fully secure the car. The small, old sedan, parked on the steep, uneven shoulder with only a partially engaged handbrake, had started to roll. Not backward onto the road. Thankfully, it was rolling sideways toward the cliff edge. And just as Vivian realized the error, and before she could touch the brake, the wheels hit a pile of loose rock and gravel, which immediately gave way, sending a small, alarming cascade of stone and dirt echoing down the slope. The wealthy man, Silas, who had been watching her hasty retreat, didn't say a word. He just stood there, his amused smile instantly gone, his eyes widening in alarm as Vivian's car, and Vivian herself, began to slide. The small sedan, with Vivian strapped helplessly inside, listed sickeningly toward the abyss. The air was ripped from her lungs. She couldn't move, couldn't scream. Her mind was screaming, but her body was stuck in the pure, blinding flash of impending doom. It was Silas, the man in the impossibly expensive suit, who broke the spell. He moved with a devastating speed that contradicted his relaxed initial posture. In a split second, he assessed the situation. The driver was paralyzed, the car was unstable, and the road was too narrow to easily maneuver the massive Rolls-Royce. He didn't try to get to the driver's side. Instead, he reached into his jacket, pulled out a small, sleek remote control, and hit a button. The Rolls-Royce, silently and smoothly, activated a heavy-duty winch system hidden near its chassis, deploying a thick, powerful cable that shot out with a quiet thunk and attached itself to a discreet tow hook beneath the rear bumper of Vivian's little car. The impact was slight, but it was enough. The downward slide stopped with a sudden, bone-jarring halt. The cable went taut, holding the small car suspended precariously right at the lip of the crumbling cliff. Vivian gasped, sucking in the cool, salty air. She was safe. For now. Silas strode to her door, his face no longer amused, but etched with severe focus. He wrenched the door open. Out. Now. His voice was a command, leaving no room for argument or pleasantries. Still trembling violently, Vivian fumbled with the seatbelt and scrambled out, falling almost directly into his arms. The contact was brief, impersonal, and charged with the residual panic of the near-death experience. He pulled her away from the edge with a strength she hadn't anticipated, pushing her toward the stable safety of his Rolls-Royce. He then spent the next few minutes efficiently and calmly using the winch to drag the small sedan fully onto the gravel shoulder, its front bumper now scraped raw, but undeniably safe. Once the car was secured and the Rolls-Royce's system was packed away, he finally looked at her, truly looked. Vivian, catching her breath, felt the shift from desperate terror to a boiling, defensive rage. "What were you thinking?" Silas demanded, his voice low, controlled, but clearly furious. "Leaving a vehicle unsecured on that incline? You could have killed yourself, or caused a serious accident on the road." His reprimand, though factually correct, was the final straw for Vivian's frayed nerves. Her emotional state instantly snapped into suspicion/defensiveness. He was judging her. He was a rich man in a suit standing next to his million-dollar car, telling her, the desperate woman rushing for a job, that she was careless. "I was rushing for a job interview," she shot back, her voice shaking. "It's a life-changing job. And I was running late because my clock broke." I was flustered. "You don't know what it's like to have everything hinge on 2 minutes and a working ID." She held up the soiled wallet, her initial gratitude completely vaporized. "And for the record, thank you for the rescue, but you don't get to lecture me. You're lucky. You don't have to worry about a few drops of coffee ruining your one good work suit or losing the $50 that was supposed to cover your parking and lunch for the week." She regretted the outburst immediately, but the frustration was already flowing. Silas frowned, his chiseled features hardening. He glanced down at the battered wallet, then back at her, and his words, while quiet, perfectly fueled her rising frustration. $50, he repeated, almost dismissively. You almost plunged your life, your vehicle, and potentially my vehicle and my day into the sea over $50 and a little spilled coffee? Miss, I understand being rushed, but that level of emotional attachment to something so trivial is dangerous. You need to reassess your priorities. That was it. That was the final, stinging proof she needed. He truly didn't get it. Trivial? This wallet contained her past, her present identification, and the precise cash she needed to get through this crucial day. To him, it was a trinket. To her, it was the key to stability. It's not trivial to me, Vivian hissed, her hands clenching into fists. It's the difference between dignity and disaster. But of course you wouldn't understand. Your car has a winch built into it, for goodness sake. You live in a world where money fixes everything, and the rest of us are just clumsy distractions. She looked at her sedan. It was technically safe, but the interview was long gone. The time was 9:15 a.m. She had missed it. Her shoulders slumped in crushing defeat. She was stranded, defeated, and furious at the handsome, wealthy stranger who had saved her life only to insult her struggle. Silas looked like he wanted to say more, perhaps apologize for the dismissal, but a sharp, unexpected crack of thunder interrupted him. The previously bright sky had turned a bruised, ugly purple. Within seconds, a torrential rainstorm, the kind that hits the coast quickly and without mercy, began to hammer down, obscuring the road and the view. They were stranded in a deluge. Well, Silas said, pulling up the collar of his expensive coat, it appears neither of us is going anywhere soon. The downpour was brutal. The visibility dropped to near zero, making the treacherous coastal road impassable. Silas quickly ushered Vivian into the immaculate, climate-controlled cabin of his Rolls-Royce. Her small, water-damaged sedan sat forlornly outside, a symbol of her ruined mourning and lost opportunity. Inside the luxury car, the silence was heavy, broken only by the rhythmic thump of the wipers and the distant rumble of the thunder. Vivian, shivering slightly despite the warmth of the cabin, hugged herself. Her emotional state had settled from white-hot frustration into a cold, prickly guarded hostility. She kept her gaze fixed on the rain-streaked window, determined not to engage with the man beside her. Silas, for his part, was also silent. He was watching the weather, his jaw tight. He seemed to be wrestling with the same tension, perhaps regretting his harsh, albeit accurate, reprimand. Finally, Vivian broke the silence, her voice brittle. "I missed it," she stated simply. "The interview. It's over. 9:15. Silas glanced at the dash clock. "I know. I'm sorry. You don't have to be. It was my fault for rushing." Vivian pulled the damp, battered wallet from her purse and began to methodically wipe the coffee residue off with a tissue. It feels like the universe is specifically targeting me today." She carefully slid out her plastic cards, wiping them clean. Then, she pulled out the little photograph, a slightly faded black and white picture of a woman with a kind smile. Silas watched her hands, his expression softening slightly. "Is that your grandmother?" Vivian nodded, a slight tremor in her hands. "She gave me this wallet the day I moved out for university. She told me it wasn't about the money inside, but the path ahead. And I've kept it. This," she continued, gently pulling out a tiny, tarnished copper penny from a small hidden pocket, "was the first money I ever earned selling lemonade when I was 7. She held the penny up to the light, and for the first time since the ordeal began, the guarded hostility around her cracked. A genuine sadness and vulnerability shone through. "It's not about the $50 cash, Silas. It's about the fact that if I'd lost this, I'd have lost my grounding. It's trivial to you, perhaps, but it's my history." This small revelation, a simple copper penny and a childhood memory, was the pivot point. Silas shifted in his seat. The cold severity in his eyes began to give way to dawning curiosity. He realized that his assumption of her trivial attachment was wrong. It wasn't about money, it was about meaning. "A copper penny from a lemonade stand," Silas mused, his voice dropping slightly. "That's quite a valuable memory." He paused, then leaned forward just a fraction. "Wait a minute. I know this sounds strange, but that penny doesn't have a small scratch, a little notch near the date. Vivian looked at him, confused, then brought the coin closer to the light. Yes, actually. A little crescent moon shape. I remember doing it myself with a key when I was a kid. Why? Silas stared at the penny, then back at Vivian. The curiosity on his face turned to something much deeper, an expression of shock mixed with an intense, searching emotion. Tell me, he said, his voice barely a whisper, the formality of addressing her as Miss completely gone. Was your grandmother's house near the old, abandoned lighthouse on the northern coast? Near a massive old oak tree that used to have a rope swing? Vivian's breath hitched. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but this time, it wasn't from fear, it was from a sudden, dizzying sense of confused nostalgia. She knew that lighthouse. She knew that rope swing. It was the setting of her most cherished, distant childhood memories, and she had never told anyone outside her family about it. Yes, she whispered back, staring at him. How could you possibly know that? Silas looked away, running a hand through his silvering hair. A haunted, complex memory flashed across his face. Because, he replied, his voice gruff with sudden emotion, when I was 10, I spent one single summer there with my family. And I distinctly remember pushing a little girl on that swing until she was dizzy. And when she fell off, she scraped her knee and, in a fit of dramatic childhood rage, carved a crescent moon into a penny she called her lucky charm. He turned, his eyes locking with hers. That little girl, she was you, wasn't she? The downpour outside continued, but inside the Rolls-Royce, a much more profound quiet had fallen, heavy with the weight of 25 years. Vivian and Silas sat utterly still, the tarnished copper penny linking their present, storm-ravaged reality to a carefree summer day they had both forgotten until this very moment. Vivian's initial shock settled into a fragile, cautious hope. It wasn't a hope for romance yet, but a hope that maybe, just maybe, this unexpected connection could mend the disaster of her morning. She looked at the man who was now, impossibly, a piece of her personal history. He wasn't just a wealthy critique. He was the boy who pushed her too high on the rope swing. Silas, she said softly, using his name for the first time without malice. You really are him. I remember the bandage you had on your knee that summer. And the dog, a giant Great Dane, I think. A genuine, warm smile, the first she'd seen, briefly illuminated his face. Captain. He was a menace. He ate my entire birthday cake that year. The shared memory broke the last of the tension, replacing it with a strange, comfortable intimacy. Silas, without prompting, then offered her a way out of her ruined day. Look, Vivian, he said, his voice practical but kind. The roads will clear soon. Your interview is gone, yes, but I know the CEO of that firm very well. If the job is important, I can arrange for you to meet him this afternoon. We can call it a late lunch. Vivian was stunned. This was the kind of power she couldn't even dream of. You would do that? After I yelled at you. You were having a bad day, Silas conceded, shrugging his expensive shoulders. And you were right. I judged you unfairly. I forgot what it's like when $50 is a crisis. He trailed off, his face clouding over again. You just what? Vivian asked, sensing the opening. Silas took a deep breath, the confession clearly difficult. I was having a bad day too. The reason I was on this road, driving slowly, was personal. Highly so. He paused, then gestured out the window toward the sheer drop where her car had almost gone over. That cliff. Almost exactly 20 years ago, that's where my wife's car went over. She was driving that morning to meet me. We were supposed to go on a trip. And she took that curve too fast. I've come back here on this date every year since, just to see the spot. Just to remember. The air thickened instantly. Vivian felt the shift in Silas's persona. The cold, dismissive, wealthy man vanished completely, replaced by a man carrying an unbearable weight of sorrow and a silent, yearly penance. The revelation hit Vivian with a crushing force. Her emotional state shifted immediately to profound guilt/empathy. She remembered her own scathing words. You don't have to worry about a few drops of coffee ruining your one good work suit. You live in a world where money fixes everything. She had been so wrong. His wealth hadn't fixed the most important thing, a gaping, 20-year-old wound. His reprimand about trivial emotional attachment wasn't about money. It was about the dangerous, sudden finality of loss on this very road. Silas, I had no idea, Vivian stammered, horrified by her own selfishness. I am so sorry. For what I said. For everything. Silas simply shook his head. You couldn't have known. But it changes things. It changes what I prioritize. You were worried about a wallet and a job. I was trying to survive another anniversary of a disaster. It makes the little things feel easy to dismiss. The storm began to break, the sun finding weak spots in the clouds, casting long, golden streaks into the cabin. Vivian reached out, tentatively touching his arm, a gesture of pure vulnerability. It's still not trivial, Silas. The small things are what we hold on to when the big things are taken. Your wife, she would want you to move forward, not just mourn here every year. Silas looked down at her hand on his sleeve, his guarded facade finally crumbling. He didn't pull away. He didn't speak. He just stared at her, seeing not the harried, panicked woman who had yelled at him, but perhaps the little girl on the rope swing, offering him a sudden, unlooked-for anchor. Let's get you that lunch meeting, Silas said, his voice low and husky, pushing the sorrow back down. The job is the priority now. We can talk about lighthouses and Great Danes later. Thanks to Silas's intervention, the disastrous morning had transformed into a whirlwind of opportunity. The CEO, clearly respectful of Silas's recommendation, met Vivian over a late, casual lunch. Vivian, galvanized by the near-death experience and the sudden, raw vulnerability shared with Silas, was brilliant. She was sharp, passionate, and articulated her vision for the environmental project with such conviction that she knew, even before she left the table, that the job was hers. Silas had dropped her off at the restaurant entrance, his Rolls-Royce appearing and disappearing with the efficiency of a high-level operative. He had promised to call her afterward, to debrief their extraordinary day and talk more about that summer on the coast. Vivian, back in her own secured sedan, drove home in a state of nervous euphoria. The job offer came officially by email at 4:30 p.m. She had done it. She waited. The euphoria slowly curdled into anxious expectation. She waited for the phone to ring. She waited for a text. She waited past dinner, watching the clock tick. The sky outside darkened into a deep, starless night. He didn't call. By 9 p.m., the anxiety had turned cold. Vivian's mind started to spin. Had the shared moment been too intense? Had she, the woman who had criticized his wealth, suddenly become another inconvenience that his money could simply drive away from? Was he back at that dangerous cliff, losing himself again in the memory of his wife? The possibility that he was withdrawing, retreating into his grief and his solitude, spurred Vivian to action. She could not accept this silent ending. She had faced a cliff, faced professional ruin, and faced down her own prejudice. She wasn't going to let him disappear now. Her emotional state hardened into determined resolution/hope. She knew where he had to be. She knew where she needed to go. She pulled on a heavy jacket, grabbed her keys, and drove. It took her 45 minutes to navigate the dark, winding coastal road back to the site of their wreck. When she pulled up, she saw it immediately. The sleek, black, powerful Rolls-Royce was parked discreetly beneath the old oak tree, the one that used to hold the rope swing. Silas was not in the car. He was standing near the cliff edge, far enough from the treacherous drop to be safe, but close enough to the raw elements to feel the power of the ocean. He was staring out at the dark, vast Pacific, a silhouette against the faint moonlight. Vivian got out of her car and walked toward him. She didn't call his name. She simply walked up and stood beside him, shoulder to shoulder. "I got the job," she said quietly, breaking the silence of the night. Silas turned his head slowly. He looked surprised and relieved. "I'm glad, Vivian. Congratulations. I knew you would. Why didn't you call?" He sighed, the sound heavy and weary. Because I came back here. I always do. And every year, I realize that I don't know how to move on from this spot. I don't know how to let go of the past and walk toward the future. It's hard enough to mourn without dragging someone else into this kind of pain. He motioned to the dark ocean. It was just a beautiful moment of shared memory, Vivian. You don't need my grief. Vivian looked at the sea, then back at him. She reached into her pocket, pulled out the coffee-stained wallet, and placed it on the hood of the Rolls-Royce. I came back here for this, she said, her voice firm. Not the wallet. The truth. The past is here, yes. It is tragic and it is real, Silas. But our future isn't. Our future is getting in my car, driving away from this spot, and having that debrief about your Great Dane and my grandmother. She took his hand. It was cold, but she held it tightly. You said you helped me because the job was the priority. Well, I got the job. My financial life is secured. Now you are the priority. You rescued me from a ditch, and now I'm rescuing you from a grave. Silas looked down at her hand in his, then up at her face. The look of profound, entrenched sorrow finally began to lift, replaced by the tentative warmth of joyful acceptance. He realized she wasn't asking him to fix her life. She was offering to share his. He squeezed her hand. The Great Dane's name was Captain, and he once chewed up all my shoes. Vivian smiled, a huge, relieved, genuine smile. Then we have a lot to talk about. He didn't let go of her hand. Together, they walked away from the cliff and the ghosts it held. He turned to her just as they reached the car, and his eyes, silvered in the moonlight, were clear. I'm not going to run away this time, Vivian. I promise you that.